to Montreal Rocks. And today I have a band that I've been listening to almost nonstop, Soft Kills. We have with us Tobias Grave. Now, Soft Kills is a band from Portland, Oregon. They have over 110,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. I believe one of the reasons is because they're on 50 playlists. I just counted 50 playlists on Spotify. So
Whoa.
When you hear like a dark wave or a goth or something like that, or post-punk, all of a sudden you'll hear this song and you'll go, oh, wow, there's something there. And I would look, Soft Kills. And I'm listening to a bunch of songs. They're all good. All of a sudden there's a really good sound comes on. What is that? Soft Kills. Time after time, man, you killed it. And you make me look at the title. And then I couldn't help myself. So I bought the vinyl. And I'm
the vinyl.
Yeah, the yellow one.
Now we're locked in.
So we can't really classify you as post-punk because that category is way too wide. You're not really goth. That's kind of too narrow. But if we look at the last album, the one behind me, I consider it a little bit like a Broadway play with the whole cast of characters, but instead of Broadway, it's Skid Row. So I call you a Skid Row musical.
Perfect. No, that's really interesting that you say that because I have said this before, but the joke we made that it was the Breakfast Club soundtrack taking place at a methadone clinic. It was supposed to feel like a mixtape. It was supposed to feel like a soundtrack. I think once we progressed past our third record, even if we weren't able to execute it, it became a conscious thing that we understood that my voice was the band. And I don't mean I'm not crapping on the other elements of it. I'm just saying that we could make any kind of music we wanted to, any kind of song, and that my voice would pull it together since that was kind of the signature thing for the band. I don't think we really executed that till this record. So we were able to pull influences kind of all over the place.
Well, before we get started, because I really want to talk about some of the elements of the record, but I always like to start with the origin story. I want to know who Tobias is. I want to find out like where you started. So there's always I want to picture, maybe you can picture yourself as a young child. You're listening to, you got music playing in speakers, maybe in the car, maybe as your parents are driving you around. Is there a band or a song that all of a sudden hit you differently and music went from something you heard to something you felt?
So I grew up in a musical family. What I mean by that was that my father and his brother both worked as roadies for bands. My dad was a front of house engineer and my uncle was a guitar tech. So I grew up overexposed to Aerosmith in particular because that was the band that they both worked for, and in a way became kind of desensitized and numb to most of that stuff, the traditional rock stuff that was happening. The first band that really was important to me would have been Metallica. I am just of that age. I'm 39 years old. I went and saw Injustice for All, that tour. They had a crazy stage. It was theatrical in the ways that was like Kiss was interesting to me, even though I didn't really know anything or have any attachment to Kiss's songs. I thought they looked cool. But there was an intensity to the music that was pretty interesting. And I give them props just because bands that they covered, like the Misfits and things of that nature, like really started to pull me down the path that became my home, So probably Metallica, but also a lot of 80s, just what was on MTV at that time, Psychedelic Furs and the soundtracks of all those movies. That was constantly playing at the same time, kind of boring into my subconscious.
Those John Hughes movies were the soundtrack of many of our early exposure to, like Echo and the Bunnymen, and which got us into the Chameleons and psychedelic furs, and there's so many bands that were amazing back then, which we can kind of hear in your as an homage in your stuff.
Right, and I think what it definitely did, what it definitely bored into my subconscious was that I always associated music with like a cinematic edge. So I always pictured a scene from a movie, since there's kind of a normal scripted flow to most 80s, you know, movies that we all watched, and I would go, the this is the song where the person like realizes how they really feel, or this song is the montage song where we tell the next 6 months in 2.5 minutes. um and that's still my
Or the
language.
boombox over the head song.
Exactly, like there's these moments that I still look at music in that same way, especially when we're approaching the band and putting together albums. It's like, where is this going? Like, what part of the movie that doesn't exist is this, you know? But yeah, all of that stuff kind of combined together. But Metallica for sure was my first, like, I had a rat tail and I was wearing a denim jacket, you know?
I will admit I did have a rat tail for a small period of time, and it just could not grow for long enough to
It
make it
was,
look good.
I
But
know.
I do want to talk about you went from, I guess being exposed to music to starting a band. Before Soft Kills, you were in Blessure Grave, if I said that right. What did you learn from that band that you can carry over into Soft Kill?
Uh, so first of all, it's kind of, I think technically the pronunciation of that band name is Blessure Grave. I
Oh,
called
c'est
it Blessure,
français.
right, and I called it Blessure Grave, um, because it was on the flip down visor in American made cars. It would
Oh,
just say,
blessure
yes,
grave.
serious injury or Blessure Grave. And I said, that sounds like a goth band, you know, and we were trying to be like a gothy punk band, or I was. Um, the main difference, they are technically in the story arc of my life artistically the same band. So Blessure Grave was 2008. In 2010 I got asked to do an album on a label based out of Portland. um, I agreed, and the ups and downs and tumultuous kind of existence that I was stuck in due to drugs and other stuff, um, that segued to where the kind of people that I built up to play the songs that I had been writing, and then also songs that we were like collaborating on together, it just felt like a new thing. So we renamed it Soft Kill literally last second. Like I remember sitting at dinner with the person putting out the record, or at breakfast before we went into the studio for the first day, and going, so decided to maybe have this be a different band, which it's kind of a rocky conversation to throw into the mix. And he was super receptive and was like, oh yeah, it's a great idea, I love it. And we were like, oh weird, okay, that went good. um Really, Blessure Grave is like was very lo-fi. I was doing all of those recordings at home. It was during a wave of music where bands could record on an 8-track that they bought from Guitar Center for a couple $100, put it directly onto MySpace Music. Labels would write you and ask to put your stuff out. Blogs like Fader and Vice and Stereo Gum and whatnot would write about your music without somebody paying a publicist. It For somebody such as myself that's always like very unrealistically believed that I can accomplish anything that I try, which has been the result of most of my failures and some of my successes. um, that really reinforced that. It was like kind of an exciting little world to be in, you know. um, but Soft Kill, we just lucked into somebody that thought that paying the money that was needed to record the first album was a necessity. And I got to see like, oh, produced and in a studio through the filter of somebody else's vision of what I'm making, you get something much different. I think more powerful and impactful, as subjective as that might be. So Soft Kill's always kind of been like the more polished, realized version, even though I do some lo-fi demo stuff, or will release songs that we don't think need to be re-recorded the way that they are.
Of
You
course, now
know?
you're back to being independent and really controlling everything, all the way down to the merch and all that. I want to talk about your arc, your origin story arc. So at one point, you record a Savior, with which dealt with Dominic, your son, that whole experience in the hospital a long
Yeah.
time ago. As you look back on that album, what are some of the feelings that well up?
God, Savior is interesting because it also touches on something you talked about a couple moments ago in terms of it really like sets the foundation for us being able to do Dead Kids, because when my son was in the hospital and I wrote and recorded the first song in the hospital room that my partner Nicole was recovering in, because she had an emergency C-section. She almost passed away as well, and it was just a pretty brutal experience. So we had no money. We were randomly in Sacramento, and I had my
You were on
laptop.
the verge of losing everything, everything.
100%. And I was a very small blip of sober, even from things like weed and whatnot. So I was in this. I was really hitting me full force for the first time in my life. I look back on it. I remember that I really felt like I was being punished for a lot of the mistakes that I'd made, how I'd treated my family, people that I was close with, and whatnot. That my drug addiction and that lifestyle had really um, controlled the narrative of like literally everything and people that came into my life. Um, but really, what that record's about and what it wells up in my brain is, it was just a real coming to God moment. Like I was really saying, for the first time, I was looking in a mirror and I was seeing somebody that was so terribly scared to get clean. Um, Somebody who had really never fully come to grips with addiction. Um, that's yeah, I think it's kind of misconstrued because the record is brought on by my kid. There's very little about it that's about him. It's
Mhm.
very autobiographical. You know, it's really. And when I wrote those songs, I remember hearing kind of the way that they flowed and saying, "Well, these are definitely not soft kill songs." Um, and then pretty quickly, uh, because with Choke being like fairly collaborative, like half of that record we kind of wrote as a band, or at least Conrad and myself and our old bass player Owen. I was like, I don't want to just hand them a record, you know. So this is something else. I'll do this on my own. But those songs were so different and unique, and we started being like, hey, this is the band. This is Soft Kill. This is the direction that it's going in. I would say that I would sum it up as fear. I was really scared. I think back on that time, and I was scared in one capacity, to lose my son and to lose my partner, but I was also scared because I just really realized that, like, even if both of those things survived, what was I able to offer and provide for them?
Hmm.
And that was just, it's something that some people come to grips with before they have a plate like that. You know, I got it pretty like thrown right in my face.
And of
You know?
course, to to go through that is all about taking control from the substance that was controlling you and your actions, and now your actions are your own. And you once said, my kid is a wall between me and bad decisions.
Yeah, it's 100% true. First of all, my kid is a lot of work. He's 4 years old. He's incredibly healthy. He's incredibly smart. He's incredibly manipulative, and he's full of energy. So if I even had the energy to go get relapse and go off the deep end, God, I would probably need like a 2 week grace period of just doing nothing to gain that power, because he's so draining. But more than that, what I really meant by that is like I look at my son and I see myself at 6 or 7 really needing my father, uh and my dad being out there doing what he had to do, working. um but it was deeper than that, and and he and I are close, so I know that out of context some things can be misconstrued, but I'm just like of a lot of kids. I was a latchkey kid. I'm from a broken home. My parents split at a time that I was very aware of what was happening. And they both made very selfish decisions that kind of shaped what my relationships with them were going to be like for the years to follow. Um, I don't want my son to go through that. I don't want him to ever question his mom or question me. Um, you just lose a lot of time, because eventually, if you're lucky enough, like I am, to be able to rebuild with your parents, you go, oh man, we could have just been doing this the whole time, you know?
Yeah, it's important. This brings us to Dead Kids, Rip City. It shines a light on addiction, which you had to conquer, and the lives of those it claimed during that dozen or so years in and around 82nd Avenue. Let's look at one story, just because we don't have time to look at all of them, but let's talk about Zachary DeLong and the inspiration for Pretty Face. Tell us a little bit more about
Oh,
that story. That's probably one of the songs that you're going to find that's going to hit you when you listen to those playlists. You'll hear Pretty Face and you go, what is that? I think that was my
pretty,
first introduction.
yeah, pretty face. I have personally, let me just preface by saying, I've personally been really excited to see that that's become one of our popular songs. Um, that song's so meaningful. It's the reason that Dead Kids exists. I was laying on a couch. Um, my partner Nicole looked over at me and she said, "Hey, your friend, because he used to be a graffiti artist named Lamer. He goes, your friend Lamer, is that Zachary DeLong?" I go, "Yes." And he goes, "He just died." And I remember jumping off of the couch and screaming, "What?" And just immediately falling to pieces internally, walking into a room and uh, creating Pretty Face. Owen, who used to be in the band, was there, and we wrote that song. Zach DeLong is somebody that I met in 2011. Um, we ended up in the same room because I went on a date with a girl, um, and she and I were both. I mean, anybody that was getting kind of drawn to me during that time probably had a substance abuse issue. Uh, and I show up and see her, and then we go to her house and we walk in, and this person, Zach, who I've met once before, is there with his girlfriend. And I'm like, whoa, what? Like, we're in a studio apartment, there's the four of us. It quickly goes from being a date to the four of us going out and spending the entire night smoking crack on the streets of Portland and downtown in the area that is used to be really considered at Skid Row, which is like 6th and Flanders, 6th and Everett, all down Broadway on the west side. And I remember like we had that night, and I was paying for the whole night. I probably spent $500-600. And then the next day he goes, "How do you have that much money?" And I introduced him to some of the criminal activities that I was taking place in, which was a lot of hitting stores and selling it to specific people. And he and I went on this really, it was a very heavy criminal spree. But there was a lot of moments of like us on the edge of abandon, very close. Um, and I talk about this a lot, that I know that people from the outside looking in go, "Oh, two junkies out of control." I said this the other day to some friends. The veil gets lifted. You really see people for who they are. You see somebody at the core of their addiction, which is
Mhm.
all consuming. But I got to see Zach in a light where there was like no hustle or lie or story that could be told. Like I was connected to him by rope. We could hang each other, we could keep each other afloat. There was many different ways that it could go. And I ended up getting locked up um, and going to prison. And then when I came home, he was in prison in a different state. And we kept trying to link back up. We stayed in touch. We talked all the time. He was going in and out. And when he came home, I thought he was clean. And I was at a cool point because I remember the last conversation we had was when Dominic was in the hospital. And
Mhm.
it wasn't the last conversation, but it was close to it. And it was just like, yo, he goes, when am I going to meet my nephew? And I was like, he's ready. And I was excited because I thought, even though I had no real grasp on sobriety, that I was going to be able to surround my child with like all of these broken, tormented, brilliant artists. Zach is a brilliant artist. Um, and under a different light, in a light that wasn't dangerous. And losing him created a massive hole. It also was the song that inspired me going to rehab and getting clean, and it also inspired the concept of Dead Kids. So Zach is Dead Kids. Dead Kids is about a lot of people, but he is the core of that album.
And of course, there's a saying that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And you don't bring other people up. Everybody levels you down. So you have to be
Yeah.
very careful about who you surround yourself, especially I would assume when you're getting out of addiction. Because if you start hanging out the same old friends, you're going to go back to those same habits. It's inevitable.
Absolutely. And as true as that is, at that time we were both at the bottom, and we somehow lifted each other up to where, even though we were actively on heroin at that time, um, I think we kept each other alive. I mean, I beat Zach back into life during an overdose. Like, we were that
Hmm.
intertwined with each other. And I don't think I think both of us would be dead had we maybe not met each other in that moment. I like to think that that block of time, um, that we kept each other alive. So and it's just, that's a big crazy thing. I met person who did the logo above the picture of the girls.
Mhm.
My boy Rue. Rue ran with Zach on the streets at a different time. I know Rue because we both knew Zach. How that all aligned and came together was like fate. It was really beautiful. Rue did all the art for the album. Um, it's been really exciting building a relationship with specific people that I didn't know when Zach was alive, but who, the fact that Zach only let specific people close to him. So if you were close with Zach and you have Zach stories, then there's a good chance that like you've been vouched for. So
Mhm.
I've been able to build good relationships with other people who were clean and sober, who weren't back in the day, and do that.
So when you tell these stories and you bring them to light, does it release some of the darkness?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's you know what's really strange is I when I talk about this genre of music and I talk about a lot of the bands that are influential, I don't know really what a lot of these bands are even talking about. So much of it feels very meaningless. Clearly, it's subjective. I wasn't there, like, when specific songs are written by specific bands. I'm not going to call anybody out, but I didn't feel like I had to kind of make my own meaning for things, which is how you make brilliant songs, anyways, right?
Yeah.
But I, growing up in punk, I always thought like the more visceral, in your face presentation of what stuff is was really impactful. Like, I was listening to, there's a band from Indianapolis called Zero Boys from the 80s, and they have a song, amphetamine addiction, and it's like amphetamine addiction, and I'm like, okay, I get what this is about, you know what I mean? Whether they were or not, this is
Yeah.
what this song is about. um to me, it's like I pride the fact that we present a raw, potentially even offensive glimpse into a reality that I don't think should just be summed up empathetically through like Instagram reposts, like, oh, give a coat to somebody that's homeless, or kind of just put in the peripheral and have the blinders up. Like, it's hard for me to navigate through the world, um being not incredibly optimistic, but being like incredibly politically correct at times, because I know how a great contingent of the world is living and what
Mhm.
they're going through. And I knew what it was like to kind of come back in terms of being full of that darkness and trying to talk about my life to people that hadn't lived it. And they were like, this guy's out of his mind, you know, not because I had insane opinions. I just, my life experiences were so on the edge of abandon and insanity that it was like, but they were normal. They were nothing was unique about it. I interacted with 100 people a day that were that screwed up, you know? So it's weird. It's like, I'm not necessarily just releasing my internal darkness. What I'm trying to do is like shine a light on darkness that still exists.
Yeah, and you're kind of giving us a glimpse, like we're looking through a windshield in a safe place of what's out there. Maybe the cars parked on those, a couple of those corners, and we see the stories as they unfold, and we kind of see what happens at the end of it. But we are somewhat removed from it because we are safe. We're just listeners. We're not participants, but it is important to show what's going on and what the consequences could be. I mean,
Right.
this kind of brings me to the kind of your name. Oh, you maybe don't agree?
No, I agree. I was saying like, yeah, it's no, you're right. You're totally right. I don't disagree. I thought I had something kind of to add to that, but
Oh, it's no problem.
um
Well, I
yeah,
was thinking about your name, soft kill. It comes from the divide and conquer tactic in war. And when it came
yes.
to
Can I
addiction,
just say that you're the first person who's gotten that, and that everybody else has been like, "Are you like a Alex Jones fan?" And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, like soft kill, like they're putting the chemicals in the air. And I go, "I promise you that's not how we got that name." So
I,
kudos to you. 10
I
points.
I like to do my research. So I want to take that divide and conquer tactic and apply it to your addiction. How did you divide and conquer that? It was something that just that you maybe can help others.
So a safe thing, a safe starting point with addiction when I talk to people is that take the drug out of it. So there's so many people that purely from a scientific level think about the physical dependency of a person in a drug, right? I thought that all the time. I thought like, I'm addicted to heroin. I'd get locked up. I'd sit in like county jail for 3 weeks. I'd get out. I was technically no longer physically dependent on the drug, but I went right back to it. So there is this in Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, those kind of rooms, which work for a lot of people. They're part of my story. I don't force the concept on people, but they talk about like free from the obsession of use. So that's the big thing for me, is like what trapped me and suffocated me was that I was obsessed with the use. So nothing else was important to me. There would be getting these demos wrapped up for this next album and doing this interview right here and doing other things. All of those things would feel like obstacles if I was still using, because literally all I wanted to do was use, right? Like that becomes this thing. So your world and your box becomes so small. It's simultaneously a very safe place because I don't have to explore my traumas, my resentments, my insecurities. Um, so you're not doing any self work. So what the big thing for me, and this is why it crushes a lot of people, is that they get clean and they face a world that like they don't necessarily feel very prepared to deal with and resolve the issues that existed before they got sober. Um, be it issues at home, lack of support, uh, being molested, a lot of stuff that I can relate with. Um, it's that kind of thing. So for me, I had to say to myself, I am ready to feel the world. I'm ready to deal and process through it. I always say this point. This was a big thing for me, and this is incredibly important. There comes the time where no matter how much you do, you never get past a certain point of high, and that you never feel something new. And the second it clicked to me that I realized that I wasn't going to like stick a needle in my arm or put a pipe to my mouth that was going to give me a different experience than experiences that I had already felt, I kind of went mad. I went, what? This is it? We've hit a
Interesting.
ceiling and I'm at the end of a road. And that's a big thing. There is no high that there's no, by the time you fried all your dopamine receptors and you're cooked, there's no place you go to. It's literally,
The same place.
it's the same place. And it is this like, it's like you're basically a mouse in a cage, and that's where you're trapped with it. There's no new day, there's no new feeling. And
Hmm.
for somebody like me that's, self-absorbed enough, that seemed really troubling of a reality to be stuck in. um it was time to snap out of it. I had a literal look to the sky and say, please help me, whatever is there, please. I'm at that point, and I just lucked out too. I'd never gone to rehab as punishment from court. I never went the other times people tried to send me and drag me there. I went when I was truly ready because I hadn't felt anything else.
Mhm.
And I went in like a ball of fury. I went in so fried and so cooked that I came 2 days later and I felt incredibly safe in this place that all that was really required of me is to start doing a little better, one day at a time. It worked for me.
You know what's sad is that some musicians feel that they can't create unless they lose themselves to some sort of addiction.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. I thought that too. I thought that crystal meth in particular uh, gave me an incredible ability to harness melodies and sounds that I had not wouldn't be able to grab sober. And to be perfectly honest with you, and I say this, my wife who's got 11 years clean would slap me in the face. It's true. There is certain places that you go to on certain drugs that you don't go to clean. I just don't need to write those songs anymore. I have plenty of those recordings, and I look at them and I go, whoo, there they are. And I can feel what it felt like to make it. You know what I mean? There's certain songs like the whole Premium Drifter record, which is demos, songs like Build Your Prison Walls, um, I Left You Hanging. I am like so far gone that I get these little glimpses to go back and
What's
say,
interesting is
wow,
that Soft Kills, or this latest one, the Rip City, uh, you
clean.
said that Dead Kids Rip City, right? So you said that
Yeah.
that's the most you felt it was really you. So in essence, yes, in a way, it can maybe help bring these weird sounds or these different sounds, but then again, you're now doing you, and I think that's why it's connecting way more.
Dead,
Because
dead, yeah, Dead Kids is our is I would say undisputedly our best record in terms of songwriting and uh realized vision. It's not just that it was recorded the best. Um, I'm completely sober for those songs. I wrote those songs clean. Um, I am incredibly proud of that, and I totally called my own bluff that I couldn't do it without drugs. So now there's no turning back. It's like there it is, and it does feel like me. I mean, there's nothing about that record that I would change, which I can't say that about any of the other records, especially some in particular.
so I'm sure there's another million stories you could tell. And people also like to share their stories when they meet you at shows. You're very accessible, apparently. Do you have a story in particular that maybe gives you goosebumps or blows you away that maybe you heard somebody express themselves?
that somebody has told to me.
Yeah. You know, the
I've
Marine
had a
food.
I've had so many people come up to me that said, I was literally on death's door and I found your guys' record and I felt for the first time that somebody understood what seems so uniquely broken about me, and that it has pushed me to go to rehab or to do this or to do that or to be better. Um, that's cool. The reason that's powerful to me, and it's another thing to add to the kind of concept of addiction, is that addiction like really robs you of your uniqueness. It really brings you to a place of like I'm my disease, and the disease is a literal disease.
Mhm.
And if you've got it and I've got it, hey, we're our disease. So I love when people realize that what they think is uniquely wrong with them is not unique, and that there is uh, the ability to become enlightened about it and have understanding about it, and so on and so forth. That's beautiful. Um, and definitely something that I didn't grasp till way later. But of course, I was only really in my own head. So I had, my wife who's got 11 years, like saying to me, I was like this too. And I'm like, no, you weren't. I'm worse and different and bad in a different way. And you don't get it. So yeah, people letting us know that anything that we've created was impactful as they go on that journey of self-discovery and hopefully overcome addiction is like a gift far beyond anything monetary or whatever that we've gained from this.
Definitely a worthwhile goal. Well, that was a pretty heavy discussion. So let's just flip it around and make it a little bit fun just to end. Um, got two last things I want to talk to you about. One is just a fun question. If you can keep one tattoo only, which one would it be and why?
None of them. If I had to have one,
You're only allowed to keep one.
maybe I would keep the lamer, which is Zach DeLong's tagger name on my hand. I'd keep that. Just a little reminder because he's my right hand. The rest can go.
Okay.
Get rid of.
So I'm not a sports fan so much as a music fan. And you've probably heard of fantasy football, fantasy hockey for us Canadians.
Yeah.
I like to play a game called Fantasy Rock Band. So I want you to
Oh,
create the ultimate rock band guitarist, singer, bassist, and drummer, and see who we can come up with, dead or alive.
wow. Okay. I would take. I would just like build the Stone Roses, but no. If I had to really dig and put it together, I would take John McGow. Actually, I realized that his name is like John McGowick or something. He played in magazines, Susie and the Banshees, Public Image Limited. He's like the pivotal guitar player for me of like shifting to something different. Um, I would take I would take Ian Brown from the Stone Roses. Just I love his voice. I love that it's flawed, you know. I would take God, this is hard. You know what? Maybe I would. Can I build a 5-piece?
Yeah, we need
Okay.
synths or something. I don't know. Or
Let's
two
do
guitars.
let's do the dual guitaring of John McGowick or whatever, and Robin Guthrie from Cocteau Twins. Like, let's see what they can meld together. Ian Brown on vocals, um, bass playing, maybe. God, dude, there's so many like perfect bass players. Who's the guy that played drums for The Cure for the Top? Barry Adamson, was that his name?
You can
It's
Google
just
it.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google it. He was um I love his playing style. It's like very brutal. No, let's take homeboy from Killing Joke. Let's put him on drums.
Okay.
Uh Big John or whatever. And then um screw it. Let's just like be typical and throw Simon Gallup on bass. I think that would be a pretty remarkable band. You know, you'd be able to cover a lot of ground. Those are all the elements I love. I love like tribal drumming. I love like interesting bass lines. I love the blend. This is one of the reasons I love Chameleons. You know, the Reg and Dave's like the dreamy with the gritty. That's a big part of Soft Kill's sound. That's totally coincidental. But then we went, oh, this is why we're doing this. You know, clearly it's Chameleons.
My end game for asking that question is really to find out who your influences are without asking the question, but getting a little bit, creative in it, and that would be a band I would go see. Definitely, it's all in my wheelhouse of stuff that I'm liking.
Yeah, I would lose my mind. That would be a great bit. Y'all should do it. Wait. Oh, John McGowick is dead. Okay. Well, they could hologram him.
Yeah. Anyway, Tobias, great conversation. I truly thank you for opening up and really giving us a good glimpse of not only your backstory and how you got to this point, but that courage that you had to face all those events and really take control is inspiring. And we can definitely see it in the music. It's a fantastic album. I listened to it so much, and I look forward to what's coming next. It's bound to be interesting, to say the least.
I appreciate you and taking interest in it and kind of pinpointing what I think is important about it. So that's good.